Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Welcome to overview of research method class. First of all, congratulations to everyone of you for your successful admission to postgraduate program. I was informed that some of you registered under Master by Research program, while majority of you here registered under PhD program. In this presentation, I will first explain on the researchable topic. After that, I will explain on how to identify research problem. From broad problem area, we narrow it down to specific research problem. After that, we formulate research objective and research question. And in this presentation, I will also explain theory, why theory is important for you to develop theoretical framework. And I will go on with theoretical framework by explaining the type of variable. And we move on to research design, the two type of research approach and the type of data. And also I'll show you some sample of conceptual framework. At this point, I strongly believe some of you already have a research topic, especially those who are in the second semester. But those who are just enrolled this semester, you may still looking for a right topic for your research. My first advice for you, especially those who are looking for a topic, the topic that you're going to choose must be a topic that you like to do, not the topic that is given by your supervisor or your friend or even your company. Or in case you have to the topic that is given to you, you must create an interest so that you like the topic. So, and also I am hoping that the topic that you are going to choose is the topic that is the interest of the government, maybe the community or the policymaker, so that your result and finding can benefit community at large. Choose a research topic that you like to do. So basically, there are many sources of ideas to choose a research topic. I can say the sources of ideas can be from your everyday life. Okay, for example, you notice that from your observation, you notice that workers are not in their workplace during office hours. Maybe you notice that if you are a lecturer, for example, you notice that students perform badly after the shift, the introduction of online class. Then you notice that increasing trend of accident due to drunk drivers, those from your observation. You may get some idea from that, or it may be from the practical issues. You read newspaper, you notice that current problem, there are a lot of problem facing by the government, the academic, the investors, practitioners, community. So from that, get some ideas on what research area that can address some of those current problems faced by this group of people. Or maybe from your reading of theory, you want to test whether the theory apply or holds true in your context, in Malaysian context, for example. Or maybe you can get some ideas of research topic from past research. When you read literature review, they suggest that there is lack of study on corruption, for example, in Malaysia. So the past literature suggests that more study should be done on this area. So from there, you get the idea on choosing the topic for your thesis. At this point, do not worry if you do not have specific research topic yet, but I strongly believe you already have a general idea or topic that you are going to focus for your thesis. From this general topic or idea, what you need to do next is to identify specific issue or what we call research problem. And your research problem should be interesting and significant. So if you are still not sure of your research problem, I strongly encourage you to talk to industry expert so that you can get a clearer idea of problem or research problem that you can help to study or research so that your finding can be used by the industry later. Then research from the problem statement, you need to develop research question which should be as specific as possible and it must be stated concisely. And make sure your research question can be answered. Okay, here is an example of specific research question. Okay, the first example is what are the factors contribute to fraud in certain type of industry? Maybe you want to focus on banking industry, you want to focus on construction industry, or maybe hotel industry or service industry. So this is an example of research question. Another example of research question is what are the determinants of economic growth in developing countries? Or you may ask, why some OIC countries recorded high economic growth while other negative growth? Or how do price quality rate on consumers' evaluations of products? And what are the effects of downsizing on the long-range growth pattern of companies? These are an example of specific research question. In general, for master and PhD, a thesis can have, say, an average of 3 to 5 research questions. In this slide, I would like to explain the connection between research problems, research questions, research objective, and research hypothesis. Okay, just now from the broad problem area, you need to narrow it down so that your problem become more specific. For example, when you are talking about fraud just now, you have to narrow it down. Maybe fraud can be divided into a few categories: corruption, asset misappropriation, or financial statement fraud. So you have to narrow down which part of fraud you are going to focus. The same goes to the same setting of the study. Which setting you are going to study? Are you going to look at Malaysia as a whole? It is too broad, so you have to narrow it down. Maybe you narrow it down to public sector, but again, fraud in public sector is still too broad. Which part or which section of public sector you are going to focus? Maybe you want to look at the federal level, or you want to look at state level, or maybe you want to look at local level. So you have to narrow it down. Okay, from the specific problem, specific research problem just now, you need to develop the research objective and research question. Okay, after that, what you have to do is develop research hypothesis from the research question and make sure all the research question can be measured. Question just now, you need to develop research objective. So in a way, I can say that the number of research questions normally tally with the number of research objectives. If you have 4 research questions in your thesis, meaning you have to have 4 research objectives. In general, I can say that. Okay, so based on the earlier example, the research question, what are the determinants of economic growth in OIC country? From this, you develop the research objective. Your objective of the study, number 1, is to identify determinants of economic growth in OIC countries. Okay, so the keyword is research question must link with the research objective. Okay, at this point, I assume you are okay with your research topic, research issues or research problem, research question, research objective. The next item you need to know is theory. When I explain this part, I always receive a question. Most of the students will ask question like, is it important? Is it necessary to have theory in my thesis? My answer is obvious. It is not a must, but having theory to guide your thesis will facilitate you to justify the choice of your independent variables and dependent variable. I will explain on what is independent variable, what is dependent variable in a later slide. But having theory in your thesis will enable you to justify on the choice of independent variables and dependent variable. In other words, the issue or the question of so what or why you are able to answer by using or through a theory support. So what is actually theory? Theory is actually a systematic set of relationships providing a consistent and comprehensive explanation of a phenomenon. In practice, a theory is a researcher's attempt to specify the entire set of dependent relationships explaining a particular set of outcomes. Theory is based on prior empirical research, past experience, and observation of behavior, attitude, or other phenomena, and other theories that provide a perspective for developing possible relationships. So, theory is used to prepare a theoretical framework for your thesis. Okay, in this slide, I would like to give you an example of theory that can be used for a thesis. The reason I give you example of a theory is for you to understand how from this theory you can develop a theoretical framework. In this slide, I showed you 2 examples of theory. On the left is individual fraud triangle theory, and on the right is organizational fraud triangle theory. Okay, you can actually read on this theory later, but at this point I just would like to briefly explain to you what is individual fraud triangle theory. According to individual fraud triangle theory, there are 3 factors that contribute to fraud. And these 3 factors are actually individual level factors. The first factor is pressure, financial pressure. Second factor is opportunity. And the third factor is rationalization. So according to individual fraud triangle theory, if these 3 factors exist, then there is highly likely fraud will occur. Okay. Okay, next we go on to the second theory just now. The second one is organizational fraud triangle theory. According to organizational fraud triangle theory, okay, this one you read in detail later what the theory is all about, but at this point I would like to briefly explain that according to organizational fraud triangle theory, organizational fraud occurs because of three main factors. Number one is the leadership, the quality of leadership. Number two is the culture, and number three is the control system. These two theories explain the same thing, why fraud occurs, but the first theory explains on trying to understand on why fraud occurs using individual level factors. Whereas on your side, on your right hand side, why fraud occurs or what are the organizational factors that contribute to fraud. Okay, so having a theory is important in the development of your theoretical framework, because in this theory you can actually justify on the choice of independent variable that you are going to examine. Okay, we take example of the first theory just now, fraud triangle theory, individual fraud triangle theory. So from this theory, I think the student can develop at least three hypotheses or three objectives or three research questions. Okay, the first research question is financial pressure lead to fraud, or does opportunity contribute to fraud, or does rationalization contribute to fraud? That is the research question. And from here you develop research objective. So what is the research objective? Research objective number one, based on individual fraud triangle theory, is to examine whether financial pressure will lead to fraud. Research objective number two, based on individual fraud triangle theory again, whether you want to study whether, or you want to examine whether opportunity lead to fraud. And research objective number three is you want to examine whether rationalization lead to fraud. And in contrast, on your right hand diagram where you have your organizational fraud theory, basically from this theory you can develop at least three research questions, three research objectives, and three research hypotheses. So research objective number one, maybe you want to examine whether leadership quality will lead to fraud in the organization. And research objective number two, you want to examine whether management control system will influence the level of fraud. And research objective number three, you may examine whether culture determine the level of fraud in the organization. So the theory that you're going to choose will decide, number one, on the independent and dependent variable of your study. Number one. Number two, the theory that you're going to choose will determine whether your unit of analysis of the study is individual, organizational, or maybe departmental or country level. So in this example, the two theories, the first theory, individual fraud triangle theory, the unit of analysis must be individual. Whereas on the right side, the unit of analysis should be organizational unit of analysis. So theory in this case aim to provide conceptual clarity and capacity to connect the new knowledge that is obtained through data collection and to the vast body of knowledge to which it is relevant. So without this theory, it is very difficult for you to draw the direction. At this point, I believe you already understand what is theory. Okay, now next step is how to develop a theoretical framework from the theory. Okay, I continue with the earlier example of individual fraud triangle theory. According to individual fraud triangle theory, there are three factors contribute to fraud: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. So from that theory, we draw a theoretical framework by means of diagram. So on your left hand side, you can see the diagram having three independent variables. The three independent variables are pressure, opportunity, rationalization. We develop or we extract from the theory just now. And the next box is fraud, that is known as dependent variable. So where do you get the fraud? From the same theory. So the theoretical framework will help you to see clearly the variable of the study. So in this case, there are four variables, three independent variables and one dependent variable. And you can see also the direction of the relationship between independent variables, the three independent variables, and the dependent variable. Okay, theoretical framework. Here I would like to highlight the basic features of good theoretical framework. So good theoretical framework should have number one, the variable or constructs considered relevant to the study, and it must be clearly labeled and identified. Number two, the discussion state how the variables are related to each other. The four type of variable: dependent, independent, moderating, and mediating, if any. Number three, if possible, in your theoretical framework, you should highlight the nature of the relationship, whether it is positive or negative. The nature of the relationship should be actually in line with the theory or literature review. Number four, there should be a clear explanation why you expect this relationship to exist. The relationship between independent and dependent variable. And of course, your explanation on the relationship should be supported by theory and also literature review. And finally, your theoretical framework should be presented in diagram which clearly show the hypothesis, the relationship, and also the variables. Before I explain research method, it is important for you to know why literature search is important for you to carry out your thesis. Reading literature is important because we don't want you to miss any important variable that may influence the relationship. For example, according to the individual fraud triangle theory just now, there are three elements. Without reading literature, how would you know there are three elements or three factors contribute to fraud? So having to do literature search will ensure that you are not going to left out any of the important factors in the study. And also, having to do literature search, you it will make a clearer idea regarding what variables are most important to be considered, why they are important, and how they should be investigated. And literature review actually help you to improve your problem statement to become more accurate and precise. And also, you can develop research hypotheses with a strong support of past studies. Okay, and another reason you do literature review is to avoid reinvent the wheel. I don't want you to finish everything, then you discover this study has been done exactly the same before by your own colleague. So you have to actually do literature search before you embark into a real research. Okay, literature review. This is very critical for a thesis. Okay, so when you read or you do literature search, at the end of the day, you must be able to write a short and precise overview about the present state of research that is immediately connected to your study. Okay, your literature review must provide the background and the context of the research problem. Okay, highlight the most important contribution of other studies. That is important. Okay, you must also demonstrate to the reader that you have actually conduct a thorough literature review so that you have a comprehensive knowledge of the area, and from the literature review you must be able to highlight the gap or the weaknesses of past studies in terms of sample, in terms of methodological, in terms of analysis that make you actually carry out this research to actually to fill the gap. At the end of the day, your literature review should actually discuss clearly on the theoretical framework that can be used to frame your study. Okay, this is one of the way to prepare a literature review. So you prepare a table. Okay, so in the table you should have a few columns in which you should have the authors of the paper, article, the variables that they have examined, the method they adopt, qualitative, quantitative, whether they use primary data, whether they use secondary data, the framework, you can draw the framework, and conclusion and make a comment about the paper. In the comment section, you may highlight the strength of this paper or maybe the weaknesses of the paper. You may arrange your literature search according to year. You start with the earliest to the latest and you highlight the gap. So having this type of table actually will guide you to prepare a critical literature review later. Okay, basically there are three types of research approach: quantitative research, qualitative research, and sometimes you notice students do mixed method, meaning a combination of quantitative and qualitative research method. Okay, next we go on to the three types of research approach: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method. Okay, the first one is quantitative research. This quantitative research is inclined toward where you are trying to find evidence. You want to test the proposition where the measurement for each variable has been established. And from there, you test the hypothesis. Whereas qualitative research is actually a focus on participants' meaning, learning the meaning from participants rather than literature or researcher. The initial research process cannot be specifically prescribed. It may change and modify along the way. Okay, among the most common theory used in the qualitative research include the grounded theory. And the last method is mixed method. In this method, is actually a combination of both quantitative plus qualitative. Under mixed method, it can be the researcher can start with quantitative. You test the relationship, and at the end or in the phase 2 or second phase, you interview participant or respondent to justify on the contradiction finding, or you want to confirm on something. Or alternatively, you may start with qualitative research. During the qualitative research, you develop a few variables emerge on factors influencing performance, for example. Then in the second phase, you test the factors whether using quantitative approach. Is it important or is it necessary to have both method in a single study? The answer is very varies. It depends on the objective of your study. It depends on the extensiveness of your approach. For example, if you are using quantitative research and you have a lot of respondents and the finding is already very rich, I don't think you need to go on into the second phase doing qualitative. Similarly, if you are doing qualitative research and you have a lot of respondents and your data is very rich, I can't see the reason for you to move on to the second stage of doing quantitative. It's enough for you to stick to either quantitative or qualitative. Remember, if you have, for example, if you're doing on quantitative research and your participant only, but say it's very small number, for example, 8, 50, 60 is very small, then you may support your finding with the qualitative research. In this slide, we are going to focus on quantitative research method. So in the quantitative research method, it involves a very structured approach of data collection. Data collection most likely is from primary data, which is questionnaire survey. Students develop instrument or questionnaire, distribute, can be online, can be face-to-face, it can be a postal survey. And it can be also from the secondary data, for example, annual report, financial report, internal management report. So the data must be collected in such a way it is extensive enough for you to run the statistical analysis. And at the end of the day, the finding of quantitative research should be able to be used to generalize to the whole population of the study. For that matter, you have to have at least adequate number of sample population. So from the data analysis, you can confirm whether the hypothesis is accepted or rejected, whether the finding of your study is in line with the proposed theory that you use, or maybe the theory does not hold true in the context of your study. And at the end, You can make a conclusion and recommend final course of action depending on the finding of your study. Okay, those who decided to adopt quantitative research method, please pay attention on these four type of variable: independent variable, dependent variable, moderating variable, mediating variable. Maybe I should start with dependent variable. Why do I say we should start with dependent variable? Because dependent variable is actually the central issue of your study. The area or the problem that trigger you into doing this research. So what is actually dependent variable? Dependent variable is known as criterion variable. It is a variable or construct the researcher hopes to understand, explain, or predict. So in the earlier example, you are actually interested to understand how or why fraud happened. What factor, what factor contribute to fraud occurrence in, say, banking industry? So that is the dependent variable. So when you say what factors contribute to fraud, you are looking at independent variable. So the factors is actually known as independent variable. So what is independent variable? Independent variable is actually a predictor variable. It's a variable or construct that influences or explain the dependent variable. It can be negative or positive relationship. In the earlier example, we assume the relationship are positive. For example, if there is high financial pressure, there is highly likely fraud will occur. If there is a lot of opportunity, there is highly likely fraud will occur. So the relationship look like a positive relationship. Okay. So what is moderating variable? Moderating variable can be defined as a variable that has effect on the relationship between independent and dependent variable. If you look at the conceptual framework or if you look at the theoretical framework, you should notice that moderating variable, the line is actually pointing the relationship between independent and dependent variable. The arrow should point on the relationship. And last but not least, mediating variable. Mediating variable is also known as intervening variable. It is a variable that surfaces as a function of the independent variable and explains the relationship between independent and dependent variable. In terms of the arrow or in the conceptual framework, you should notice that mediating variable should be located in between of independent and dependent variable. The arrow from independent variable should point to mediating variable, and the arrow of mediating variable should point to the dependent variable. So it actually is good for a study to have independent variables, dependent variable, moderating variable, and mediating variable in a single framework. But if you think you cannot cope, it's good to have at least 3 variables in a single study. Need to develop the hypothesis. So what is actually hypothesis? Hypothesis by definition is a tentative statement about the relationship between two or more variables. Okay, it is a specific testable prediction about what you expect to happen in your study. So based on our earlier theory, our earlier research question, research objective, here we provide example of hypothesis. So using the individual fraud triangle theory just now, the 3 factors, the 3 independent variable, from that 3 independent variable, we develop 3 research hypotheses. So hypothesis number 1 is there is positive and significant relationship between pressure and fraud. There is hypothesis number 2, there is positive significant relationship between opportunity and fraud. And hypothesis number 3, there is positive significant relationship between rationalization and fraud. Move on to data collection. Before that, you need to know that there are two types of data basically. First is primary data and secondary data. Okay, what is the difference between primary and secondary data? If your research approach requires you to collect data using primary data, you can use informal discussion and brainstorming as data collection method. Other than that, you may also conduct focus group interview or observation, or maybe you can develop a questionnaire survey, whether structured or unstructured. Or similarly, you may run experimental design to collect your primary data. Based on research objective you designed earlier, it may require you to collect data using secondary data source. In that case, the data can be collected from annual report, from budget report, or maybe from internal management report. So secondary data is actually data that has been gathered previously for other purpose, but you can use part of the data to answer your research question, research objective, and research hypothesis. Okay, the reason I show you a sample of research framework is to actually conclude of what I have explained before this. Okay, in my explanation of this class, I mentioned to you that there are at least 4 types of variables that can exist in a single study. The first variable is known as independent variable. Then the second one is mediating variable. Third one is dependent variable. From this research framework, you should notice that this study have 4 independent variable. The 4 independent variable for the studies are competition, national culture, business strategy, and IT infrastructure. And the student actually aim to test whether these 4 independent variables contribute to management control system usage, and subsequently the usage of management control system should be able to enhance performance. So from this, the student can develop at least 4 hypotheses. Maybe from this, student can develop at least 4 objectives of the study. Maybe objective number 1, the student is interested to test whether competition will increase the level of management control system among companies. Number 2, research objective number 2, the student interested to study whether national culture will influence the management control system of a company. Next one, research objective number 3, whether business strategy influence the level of usage of management control system. And objective number 4 is to test whether or to examine whether IT infrastructure will influence the usage of management control system. And on top of that, the student is also interested to test whether the management control system usage will affect on organizational performance. So from this alone, the student can have at least 5 objectives, and the type of variables involved in these studies are independent variable. There are 4 independent variable: competition, national culture, business strategy, IT infrastructure. one mediating variable, that is the usage of management control system, and of course the issue of the study is the performance of organization. This is another sample of research framework, very straightforward. From this research framework, we can see that the research is interested to examine what actually the factors contribute to the adoption of radio frequency identification (RFID). Among the factors considered in the studies are environmental factors, organizational factors, technology factors, and product factors. From this framework, we know that students can develop at least 4 research objectives, 4 research questions, and 4 research hypotheses from the framework. And the 4 factors just now: environmental, organizational, technology, and product. These factors are known as independent variable, whereas the dependent variable is the adoption of radio frequency identification. With that, I would like to end my presentation, and I wish you enjoy your postgraduate journey and learn as much as you could. Bye bye everyone.